Good afternoon, people. You are now tuned in to Urban Voices Radio. I am your host, Brad Harris, and I got my main man, Sean Mucker, in the building.
What's going on?
And we have T. Marie.
What's up?
What's going on, T? People, we have a very, very special show for you today. We have one of the how do I introduce Keturah? We have one of the people that is very instrumental in the movement for justice for Breonna Taylor. And this is one of the most important aspects of the movement. We have Keturah. I'm going to let you say it because I always messed it up. How do I pronounce your last name?
Herron.
Herron. Mm-hmm. I be want to say Herron. I'm just like, I don't want to say Herron.
You just heard me say it, right?
Yeah. We have Keturah Herron.
Yes.
And Keturah actually drafted the first draft of Breonna's Law. So, Keturah, you're on the front lines of the fight for justice with Breonna Taylor. What inspired you to draft the Breonna's Law bill?
Yeah, so first off, for those who don't know who I am, I actually work at ACLU as a policy strategist and have been doing policy work for the last couple of years. Most of that work has been in Frankfurt dealing with state legislation. And so when there was a call, and I can't remember the date, everything is starting to run into each other. But we had a call when there was some local folks on the call, a few of Breonna Taylor's family members, some folks from national grassroots organizations, and everybody was introducing themselves and saying what their role was going to be. And I just said, well, I will, when I introduced myself, and I said, I will help change legislation. And that's just because that was what I knew that I could do, what I had access to. And it started from there. It started doing research and looking at what they had already done in Houston. It was said that they had changed that in Houston, but they didn't necessarily change it completely. Oregon is the only state that has a complete ban. And actually, when we changed it here in Louisville, we're the first city across the nation who has made a ban to end no-knock warrants.
Okay, so tell us, for those who don't know, Breonna's Law, what exactly does that entail? Like, what changed from March 13th, the day LMPD kicked down her door with a no-knock search warrant, to today? So what, because prior, for folks that don't know, I'm a little older, I come from the 80s and the 90s, and there was this thing called the batter ram, which was famous in black communities. And what they would do was, when law enforcement would target drug dealers, they would, famously show up at 6 in the morning or 5 in the morning and try to catch drug suspects off guard. And they would use these no-knock warrants and just hit your door with a battering ram, which was like a metal object that just knocks the doors completely off the hinges. Yeah. So the problem was, before Breonna's Law, the problem was, if you're laying in your home at 4 or 5 a.m. or whatever time, but if you're laying in your home and someone knocks your door down without an announcement, your first inkling probably is that someone's breaking in your home. Right. So as a homeowner, you're probably going to try to protect your home. So
they're not probably. You're going to.
Yeah. Right. And this has been an issue because, as we've seen with no-knock search, well, not even with no-knock search warrants, just with intel with police agencies across the country, often there's bad intel. Or often there's several of these cases across the country where no-knock search warrants and non-no-knock search warrants have been served on people's homes, and it's been on bad intel. It's maybe been the wrong home, the wrong address, or just simply bad information from a confidential informant or sloppy law enforcement work. So what has changed from March 13th to now as far as policy?
Yeah, and I think that you brought up a lot of things, and I want people to understand, if I believe that this is correct, that the first no-knock search warrant was done in the 70s against the Black Panthers. And so when you look at historically why that tactic was even employed, it was literally employed to terrorize black folks, black communities. And so when we look at what happened here in Louisville with Breonna's case, for one, you had 5 different warrants. Like you said, it was bad information, bad intel. And for me, what I was trying to do, what I basically did, and Hannah Drake and Philip Bailey played a huge instrumental role in being my sidekicks as far as, how do we talk about this? Right. And I literally took the language from Tom Wine. He said that there's no amount of drug money or drugs that are worth a human life. And so it's important that we use their words against them, because that's what they do to us. And so I literally took that and said, we have to do a complete ban. And I think that what's important is in that first draft, I'm trying to hurry up and not knowing a lot of information. The first draft, when it had the language, it said no knock warrants would be banned unless it was kidnapping or terrorism or whatever. I wrote that language. And then it was me that was fighting to get that language knocked out at the end of it. And it was part of that is because when you're doing and you're writing policy, you have different people coming from you, and with policy folks a lot of times go by, well, we don't think that we can get that passed. You may have a council member who deeply believes that something should be something should be there, but they may say, well, I don't think we got an appetite for it. Well, I don't think that we're going to get enough votes. And for me, I was like, that's not the way we're going to roll with this. So we have to push for what we know is right, and we have to make sure that we're pushing something that is preserving human life, because basically that's what it is. We have an amendment right to protect our own home. It's called the Castle Doctrine. So how can you have the Castle Doctrine of saying that you can stand your ground in your own home, but then you have a police tactic that says that we can come in your home and not
whenever we want to.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's a conflict, and so that was how we ended up really pushing to get a complete ban. And basically what it has a complete ban, and then it also says that anytime a warrant is served, police officers have to have on their body cameras 5 minutes before they actually go in and serve the warrant, and 5 minutes after.
Okay, so tell me.
So why 5 minutes and not a little bit longer? Is it because of the briefings and stuff that the intel and things of that nature?
Yeah, we saw that in I think Oregon's legislation had it their way, and so a lot of times when you write policy, you take what other states have done. Right. And so because that's what they had in Oregon, and it's a state law in Oregon, then we felt like that was proper language to be done
so
here.
It's easier to get it approved because it's somebody already got them. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so tell us for the ACLU, you work with the ACLU, and a lot of us just see, like people like myself from the outside looking in, we see the ACLU being instrumental in filing lawsuits when injustice is done. For example, they file them against correctional facilities when people feel like they're being treated unfairly. And here in Louisville lately, they filed lawsuits or complaints against the police in the way they're treating protesters, as far as macing and pepper spraying them. What exactly does the ACLU do, and what do you do there?
Yeah, so historically, ACLU has it's an organization that's been around 100 years, and historically, their main job is to protect the Constitution. Okay. And so people's First Amendment rights, like that is what they do. What's interesting is that in the last few years, you've seen ACLU kind of broaden out to really get involved in racial justice issues. And so I started at ACLU in 2018, and when I first started, I was there for contract purposes. I'd never really done anything policy related, but I was hired on to work with the school safety bill in Frankfurt. And so the first year when that happened, they were proposing to put police in all the schools. I was able to get it to where they left it up to each school district. And then also I was able to get memorandum of understanding in the bill, which basically means that police officers would not get involved in anything in school disciplinary only if there was some type of crime committed. And so that's how I started off at ACLU, and then afterwards they asked me to stay. And so my main role now has been dealing with anything juvenile justice involved, and also I do a lot to end mass incarceration. So we have a group called Smart Justice Advocates, and it's a group of folks who have either been formally incarcerated or impacted by the justice system. And we do what we did with Breonna's law. We help draft and write policy and teach folks how to advocate to help end mass incarceration, to do stuff around bail, and just to make sure that folks have equal opportunity and injustice and all of these different areas that we're working in.
Okay, now drafting Breonna's law and actually helping create policy, was there any pushback?
Absolutely. I think that hey, how you doing? I think that anytime that you're wanting to do change, you're going to get pushback. You have different interest groups. You have victim advocates groups. You have the FOP. You have all of these different groups that think that our community should be a certain way. And so anytime that you're doing policy, whether it's around taxes or education or healthcare, you're going to have opposition. And so we did have pushback, definitely from law enforcement folks. We had pushback from regular folks. Some of my closest people said, well, if somebody's got me kidnapped, I want police to be able to come in. And so I think the biggest thing with policy is that we have to educate the public around like what things really mean and what a certain policy does right now and where we're trying to get to help our community to be better.
Okay, so for those who don't know, what the pushback towards no-knock warrants, what inspired that pushback? I mean, it was quite obvious that Breonna Taylor's case brought national attention to it, but for those that feel that no-knock search warrants have always been a useful tactic as far as law enforcement, from your position, why do you feel that no-knock search warrants need to be eliminated?
Why they need to be eliminated?
Yeah.
I think when you talk about preservation of human life, I think that it's not safe for the citizen who's behind the door, and it's not safe for the police officers who's going in. And when we're talking about what does community police mean and what does safety mean, it's safety on all levels. So it's not just a anti-police bill or it's not just a pro-police bill. It's common sense. And I think that what we have seen for so long is that we have utilized certain tactics in our communities or certain things. That's the way it's always been. And we have to think about is what makes sense. And for me, it made sense to do that. And we know if you call 911 and it's like such and such is in there and they got a gun to the you don't need a search warrant.
Right.
But in our minds, when we hear no-knock warrants, we're like, well, they can't go in if it's an emergency. No, if you call 911 and it's an emergency and you get there and it's all this stuff going on, they're gonna go in and do that.
Right.
But if it's just, well, let's get this warrant and and then it gets it to where you have police starting to do things that they shouldn't be doing.
Right.
And so for me, at the end of the day, it's about preservation of human life, whether it's the citizen behind the door, whether it's the neighbors around that house, and then also for the police officers. That's what makes sense to me.
Do we know when the no-knock warrants was established? Like, how long ago?
I think she said the 70s, didn't you?
It was in the 70s. I think the first one was done in Oakland. If my memory serves right, it was Oakland.
Okay, the Black Panthers.
The Black Panther
okay.
Party. I think it was like maybe 74, 75.
All right, so question. This is my biggest concern. We've eliminated no-knock search warrants here in Louisville. Is there any way for the ACLU or yourself to create policy that centers around even obtaining a warrant? Because what bothered me was that in this particular case, in the Breonna Taylor case, there were 5 no-knock search warrants issued by a judge, and the verdict is out on that. Right. But there's 5 no-knock search warrants issued by a judge within maybe 12 minutes or something like that, and in the city of Louisville, annually, they didn't keep great records, but annually, between 12 and 24 no-knock search warrants were issued a year, so not a lot. So here you have 5 of these being presented at one time, and they're signed within, if they're signed within an hour, you know what I mean? That's a lot, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So is there any way to create policy where, because what bothers me is that law enforcement has, their word holds a lot of weight, mm-hmm. and they often are given the benefit of the doubt, and I understand that from a certain aspect, but it leaves room for corruption, because a law enforcement officer can say, we want a search warrant based on A, B, C, and D, and that information may not be correct, and we're giving the benefit of the doubt through the system that when a judge looks at this, okay, well, I'm just going to sign off. Is there any policy that can be created to at least
Give them 24 hours.
to make a chain of command, or at least where an officer just can't sign this, submit it to a clerk and a judge, and then boom, it's signed. Is there a way to create some steps where there's some safeguards here?
Yeah, and I think that one you bring up a lot, and that's a very complex issue. And I think that you have the judges. What are judges to be for me? If I was a police officer, that I take something to a judge and the judge just signs, I feel like that there needs to be something done at that level. Like what is that safeguards? What are you all looking at? And I don't know what that is from the judge's standpoint, but I think that's. Did you even read? Or what is that criteria you're looking at? I think that's one component. But then, like, you're right, as far as the police, what is that? And I think that part of that is internal police policy. And I think that it's on the city level ordinance, but then I also think that it's state. I don't know which one to attack first. And I think that that's one of the things is with policy is that there's so many different levels and layers to it. It's like really who has the true responsibility to stop something like this from happening. And to be honest, I'm learning. So I've never really done anything regarding police practices, and so all of this for me is as I'm doing, I'm learning.
And I also feel like, what I'm saying, there should be like a level of chain of command that has to sign off on this paperwork prior to it going to a judge, like several levels of signatures on it, and not just one or two. You know what I'm saying? Go all the way up the chain of command. So if something does happen, you can see all the people who have signed off on it.
Agree.
Before it gets to the judge.
And that's what I know that Representative Scott is filing legislation on the state level, and I also know that Senator Stivers and Senator Neal has something that they're proposing as well. So I think that we will see that on the state level. But I also think what's important is that each jurisdiction has their own FOP. They have their own collective bargaining unit. So I don't know how that. I personally don't know how that will work. And Shameka might have.
I would just add that attorney.
Before you start talking interview session, no one knows who you are.
I like that. I know you also.
Right.
So I'm Shameka Parrish-Wright.
I'm gonna need you scoot up a little bit.
Here today, I'm a co-chair of the Kentucky Alliance Against Racist and Political Oppression. And I'm also, as related to this issue, I'm the operations manager for the Bail Project. So, but I wanted to say that one of the attorneys we work with the Bail Project, attorney Ted Schaus, there was an article just in the Courier Journal, basically where it's saying legal professionals are saying maybe those officers shouldn't be fired, or what I think a lot of legalities stem around is that, one, most court proceedings are recorded. Anything that you do in the court is recorded. But for some reason, the warrant process isn't. And so when you talk about the 12 minutes, there's a set of judges that they're able to go and pick. And so a lot of us believe that Judge Mary Shaw was picked for a reason, that, she would be the weakest link, for lack of better terms right now. And so they picked her, probably went in, and just like I know you, Brad, I can come in and say, hey, Brad, sign this is for this, and then it just happened. But I agree with you, it needs to be a better process, because I don't think she woke up and said, I want to sign Breonna Taylor's life away.
Right.
But I do think, like you said, the police officer's word carries so much weight, she has no reason to question it. But like Keturah is saying, judges preside over our lives. They change our whole lives in the course of the judicial process. So that has to be done in a way that's very open, that's transparent, because this is somebody's life. And as I came in, you were talking about no-knock warrants. All over this country, they're a problem. Their kids are just sitting there watching TV, and somebody busts down their door and they're putting guns to their heads. There's been other deaths linked to it. And just in Texas, there were 6 officers indicted off of a one. And so what I said when I first found out about this Breonna Taylor case is that it looked like a raid that went bad. Mm-hmm. Like, why 1 a.m? Why that way? Why, why? It's just so many questions and pieces to that. I think that it's going to be a job to link all of those things together to really get the convictions that we want to see. But from the very start of it, it started with those signatures happening in that way. I don't care if it was a stamp or it went through a clerk. 12 minutes, 5 warrants is that's irresponsible. My life is worth you reading through 5 warrants. Your life is worth it, and that didn't happen for Breonna Taylor. So this does need to change. So we're saying warrant assignments should be randomly assigned. So if we all were locked up right now, our judges would be randomly assigned to us. That's how the warrant process should be. So I can't come in there, oh, I know Brad will let this go through, and I'm going to just let him sign this. They'll be randomly assigned and hopefully offer some more due diligence. We're also saying that those proceedings should be recorded. I don't care if it's just hearing somebody scribble on a paper, signing it. If it's cut and dry, record those, because just like Breonna's case, we don't have any cameras that were on, and so now that where video is so important in these cases, even there's video. My friend Sam Dubose, his was all on video, and that officer still was acquitted. But having the video gives us something more to fight for. It gives us something, more of a leg to stand on, because we don't know what happened. We don't know what was said. But whatever happened, 5 death warrants were signed in 12 minutes, and that should never happen to anyone else. So if we don't get anything else out of this, we need to make sure those processes are more transparent. And any judge, judges are supposed to be for all of us. I don't care if they're pro-police or not. They are there to serve every one of us in the community. And it's actually more of us than it is of police. So it would behoove them to do what's right. Our judges are elected as well. And we have over 40 seats, 40 judicial seats coming up in the next year or two. So we got to be really diligent. We got to be on this. This is the perfect topic, because this stops this happening to somebody like my daughter that's sitting behind me, somebody like any of us ever again. We have to change those policies.
Okay, so question. So is that the way currently that the system runs? So if I'm a police officer and I want to obtain a warrant, I can choose the judge that I submit the affidavit to?
You choose from 7 to 9 different judges. You can choose who to submit that to. That's problematic.
But I also think they know which judge is for them also, so it's easier for them to...
Well, you develop a relationship.
Pinpoint whichever. But I also think that, another problem that has arisen is that a lot of police officers get off. It's not no proper checks and balances when they do wrong. You see what I'm saying? And I think that's a big problem with what's going on now, is that, okay, we know for a fact that they falsified the warrants. You know what I'm saying? That should already carry weight right now. That should be a fireable offense right there.
And then they even falsified the incident report.
Exactly.
Breonna Taylor is no longer with us, but they said there was no injuries. And so when you look at this case, it's almost like it's like sometimes I feel like I'm in a damn movie.
Right.
That's exactly what it feels like.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm in a movie, but what's gonna happen next? You're just waiting for the next thing or the next
episode.
The next thing that's gonna come out, because it's all of it seems like everything has been falsified from the very beginning of this case.
And when it boils down, that's crazy, because we can see all those angles. But when it boils down to what the Attorney General is going to do, they're going to look at those facts and those, so the officer that submitted these warrants has been reassigned. He is he has a big blame in this. Right. But those officers, as things stand, and I know I don't like the title of that Courier Journal article that says that these legal professionals, but they're going to stick to the law on that. So by law, because those warrants were signed by a judge, they can try to hide behind that in that whole process. But they can't hide behind shooting blindly into a building like that. They can't hide behind all the other things that happen. An officer leaving for an hour and a half and coming back. No footage. There's so many other holes in that we as a community, we have to stick to that. We cannot let whatever this Attorney General say be it. It's not going to be it, because the Attorney General says, look, I've tried everything. I wish he would come and talk to us like he did in FAC. I wish he would come out on the street and say, look, I'm trying to find some angle here. I'm doing everything that I can. Just period. We don't even get that courtesy. But if somebody threatens to burn down the place, then they get a whole conversation shepherded by Councilman James. that is not okay, because you're ignoring people who've been in these streets over 66 days, and you're not coming to them and saying, let me tell you all how this probably would work. Let me tell you and give you more transparency so you know that my decision is a very hard one, but now it's going to look like you're a part of this, Attorney General, because you haven't been forthcoming with us. You haven't come down to the streets to meet with us. You haven't given us an opportunity to weigh in or even ask you questions. And I will say, the mayor got grilled every time he came down, but he did come down to the square at least 8 times. He came down to the square, and each time, but we can ask them that. We vote them in the office.
We pay their salaries.
Pay their salaries. We get to be mad and upset. So when people come to me and say, what do you think about NFAC? I said, what do you think about the homegrown anger? What do you think about the homegrown frustration, tired of police brutality, tired of police violence? And for somebody like me, this is not new. I had to watch one of my dear friends murdered on camera. He was acquitted twice. And then he sued the city and got $350,000 in back pay. Yes, we won that risk, but Mayor, you can still fire them. You can still fire them because how they carried that warrant out, no matter what, was wrong. And we can all tell that wasn't the first time that something like that happened. What I've been saying to people was like, damn, what if Kenneth Walker died? Then this would be a whole different situation, right? Yeah. Because it wouldn't be nobody to
tell
fight.
the story.
Exactly.
Now we go back and you say this happened before, right? I have a friend. I need to bring him up here too. I have a friend named De Niro Andretti, and he customizes tennis shoes. That's his business. He customizes tennis shoes. He's actually done work for the Kentucky Derby Museum. And last year, SWAT team kicked in his door, no knock search warrant, held him, his family, and his kids at gunpoint through and I'm going to explain the process in a minute of how they actually, to the people on the air who actually, the process of how they initiate these raids. But they kicked in his door in the West End. He's a shoe designer. They don't sell drugs, but they had intel that someone was selling weed out of that house. And it was some intel that was bad intel. There was the wrong name on the search warrant. I don't even know I think the address was correct, but it was the wrong name. And I think a confidential informant just gave them some bad intel, but they kicked in the door. They held these people and their children at gunpoint, and nothing was found. It was a botched raid, and they're actually suing LMPD as well. I think one of the officers involved in the Breonna Taylor was actually on that.
I think all their cases need to be reviewed. Anything that any of them were on, I think it's a big trail of tears. So God bless my father. So we went up there to visit him in Cincinnati before he died, and a no-knock warrant was served at his house. And they bust through his door, they put some flares in there, burn up his carpet, and then end up taking he had these like Yankee candles with some like oats or something, and it took his candles, said that it was supposed to be weed, didn't find anything, so took my father's candle off his cocktail table, and then left. The doors damaged. With the rental company was trying to charge my father for it. Carpet damage. They don't come in and clean up, and they don't take care of any of the other parts that come with that. Just like if somebody's dead in your home, they're not going to clean up all of that. So it's just horrible on all kinds of levels. We laughed because my father was really mad about those candles when we got there. We were like,
that was his personal thing.
But he was So they didn't have anything else. Yes, right. And they took his candle. Right. They didn't. It's just like that. A bogus informant was. That's the thing. When you're under stress or you're scared, you're gonna tell the police anything they want to hear. They know that. Like what happened with Breonna. And then they try to lie on the post office and say this. And all these cases, I think it's been a big cover-up. I think any case that any of them were on needs to be reviewed. And if I was somebody that suffered from them, I would be filing charges.
Well, see, here's my issue with that. My issue is this, is that in the community, there needs to be more evidence before any type of search warrant is ordered on a person's home. And I give you an example. I'm sure every one of us in this room may have an encounter with someone that does something illegal, maybe sells drugs that we don't know about. You don't know what people do in their private life. Right. So say I'm buying we'll use a candle. Say I'm buying a candle, or I'm buying a cake, or I'm buying something from someone that may in their another aspect of their life may sell weed or may sell drugs that I don't know about. He delivers a cake to my home, and that shouldn't be enough for a police officer to say, well, hey, we suspect this guy is selling drugs. We just saw him go to this man's house with a box. He's complicit in the drug trade too. And next thing I know, my door is coming down and I have a gun in my face. There should be more evidence should be necessary before warrants are issued when you're talking about invading on the rights of private citizens. And that's what would concern me most about the Breonna Taylor case, is that allegedly they're investigating her ex-boyfriend, not Kenneth Walker, an ex-boyfriend from 4 years ago. So they follow this guy to her home, and to them, that's enough to say, hey, well, he's keeping drugs here, she's selling drugs, and then they obtain a no-knock search warrant based on that. That is not enough information to get a warrant on anyone.
Yeah, and I think one of the, what you bring up is one of the larger systemic issues, is that police terrorize black communities. And you're talking about low-level drug dealers.
Exactly.
You're not talking about kingpins.
Right.
And so when you're talking about when you talk about the no-knock warrants for police, they say, well, we need to make sure that they don't get rid of evidence. A kingpin can't flush kilos down the toilet.
Right.
And so you're talking about maybe $100 worth of drugs that may get flushed. Again, is that worth
someone's life?
Is that worth someone's life? But that is the way they have always policed our communities. And that's the way they always done it. Even with Russell Coleman coming out, what was it, on Wednesday or Thursday, talking about, you know, we've done this whole raid. We've got 11 drug dealers off the street.
Irritating.
But you got $300,000 off the street. That's a low level drug dealer.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
If you getting 11, 14 people, you need to be getting millions. Don't bring that shit to us.
Yeah.
And that is them terrorizing. That's them terrorizing our community.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you touched on that, because what irritated me about that press conference is that the climate of the city right now, the climate of the city for the black community and a lot of allies from the white community, is that we want justice for Breonna Taylor. Mm-hmm. And part of this wanting justice is following the tagline of Black Lives Matter. Whether it's the organization, whether it's the phrase, whatever it is, Black Lives it's a movement, right? To stand in that press conference at a time where we haven't had justice for Breonna Taylor, where we're awaiting an Attorney General and FBI investigation, where the city feels like there's a cover-up, to stand in that press conference and use the words, if Black Lives Matter, we need to clean up some of the areas where Black lives, it was disrespectful. Now, I understand your sentiment about that, right? But to use it in a press conference where you're incarcerating other black males, to me, was a jab that you're always telling us Black Lives Matter. It was a jab. It was a jab. And I took it personal.
Yeah,
you know?
You should have, and it's a distraction, too.
Exactly.
That's exactly what
That's what I called it. I was like, so let's talk about all the crap that Trump is doing.
Yeah.
So if you want to, if Black Lives Matter, we can say a whole lot. But you're exactly right. That's how I felt. I saw it, and I was like, this is just a distraction from what we should be talking about. And they don't like that it's in their face. And even those of us who have roles in the mayor's office or government, we even living and being in those roles, you still have a role and a duty to the people to understand this could be you. It could be any of us at any given time. And so any other thing is a distraction.
So you also feel like that... you know, one of our problems is we always accept the money. You know, when they come with the settlement, we accept whatever they trying to give us, you know, which is, you know, okay, minority family, low income. Of course, they want the money. But, you know, sometimes we got to say the hell with the money and make them do their job. You know, push it farther from the settlement.
Well, let me be clear on that a little bit. Well, let me be clear on that, because I had this discussion with people a lot, right? And a lot of people don't understand that there's a difference between a civil lawsuit and a criminal proceeding, right? So when the families are suing the government or the police department for wrongful death, that's all they can do at that point is make you pay financially, right? The family can't push prosecution. The only people that can push prosecution are prosecutors, and that's on the criminal side. Are your prosecutors, your AGs, your state officials. They can push criminal proceedings. Like paying the family a wrongful death settlement has no bearing on the criminal side of the case.
Well, when I say that, I mean, like, you know what I'm saying, I think one of the biggest things with the mayor, let's mute the mayor. You know what I'm saying? We don't have to listen to the mayor. We don't have to listen to this new cut him off.
But unfortunately, we have to because he has the information that we're seeking.
But like I said, us as a community, I think one of the biggest things with us, we need to unite. The more that we get on the same page, the more we get our leaders on the same page, the stronger our fight would be.
Yeah.
And too many of us can be bought off, and that is the hardest part. And in Louisville, and it's not just unique to Louisville, but you have 3 types of black people here, and you have those of us, because of our work, we navigate all those spaces. But then you got some who never have to talk to the working class, who never have to talk to those who are living in poverty and houseless, who live in a bubble because they've been accepted and they've been bought out. And so that sometimes weighs a lot of pressure. Even when you're doing grassroots work, they'll give you a job with the city, and your fight is different. It's like any artist's first album. It's the most grittiest one, right. And then by the time the second and third one come, so we do gotta take care of each other, and we do gotta keep that fight going. And I think it's easy to pick us off because our jobs here don't pay much. They say our cost of living is low, but our jobs pay even worse. And so we're trying to live like a big city, but we're not earning the wages that we need. And so that makes it easier for those of us living and struggling with poverty to be bought off. And so they get the job at the mayor's office or somewhere else, and it's like, well, I really, I got this job. I don't have to fight the same way.
Yeah, they put their beliefs to the side.
Yeah, and they don't.
And we see it all. Y'all see it.
Y'all see it. Yeah, and people won't stand up and say the things that they would normally stand up, which is for me, like, it's like, I get it. You got to feed your family. You got kids to feed. We want to make sure that we can go on vacation. But then at the same time, that's not what overall black liberation is.
Exactly.
But I also think that right now we're seeing something different that we've never seen in our lifetime. I think that because I'm 40 years old, we've seen and we understand what slavery did to our families. We've seen what Jim Crow did to our families. We've seen what the war on drugs did to our families, and now we're living in this world of police brutality in a different type of way. And then you have this younger generation, the folks who were in their 20s. Breonna Taylor was 25, 26.
Yeah.
So it's different type. The fight is different. It's personal in a different type of way. I know even for myself, the way I show up, I show up different than I did before because it's a different type of fight. And I'm still trying to process and understand really what that means. But this is a different type of fight than what we've seen before, in my opinion.
And let me add this. There's been a lot of it's easy to criticize, right? Yeah. It's easy to criticize. And I have you two up here not only because you're involved in the fight, because you're black women involved in the fight. And I think that's very important, being that a black woman was murdered. And often when we see cases like this, it's typically a black male that receives most of the attention. Or Sandra Bland's didn't receive as much attention that I feel as was deserved. So to see yourself and Shameka in places that are important, and I'll break this down, is that you were instrumental in Breonna's law. Shameka, we're going to get to this in a second. You are very instrumental in bailing out a lot of these protesters. There's processes here. Lanita Baker is instrumental in the civil case against the city. And what makes this civil case, look, usually when we see civil lawsuits involving wrongful death, when it comes to police being involved, usually a lot of this is behind the scenes. We don't see this with Sam, I always get his name wrong, Sam Aguilar, Sam Aguilar and Lanita Baker. What we see is that the civil attorneys are actually doing investigative work that are bringing out evidence that could possibly be used on the criminal side. Mm-hmm. So we've seen a lot of that happen. So we've seen work on the streets. We've seen Keturah. We've seen Shameka do work. We've seen Lanita do work. We see Sam do work. We see Black Lives Matter do work. Yeah. We see all these groups in our city doing work, and a lot of it's behind the scenes. A lot of it is not covered by mainstream media. So we do have a few players that bring some negativity to the game, but there's definitely work being done on the ground by homegrown movements.
Yeah.
Now, Shameka, can we get into the Bail Project and exactly what you guys do?
So the Bail Project is a national organization. We work to get people out pre-trial. We work to do this work, and it was important for us. I tell people I got lucky. This work interconnects with everything else I got going on. Just like Keturah, I would be out there at our courthouse every day anyway. I've been meetings in every one of those buildings that surround the park, because the work of ending pretrial incarceration is important. So we've invested over $8 million in getting people out. We've gotten a little less.
Let me slow you down real quick before we get started. For those, because a lot of people don't know. Explain to people what pretrial incarceration is.
Okay, pretrial incarceration is you get a charge. Our country says, and our Constitution says, you're innocent until proven guilty. I don't know if folks know this, but bail was set up to be an incentive to come back to court. It was never meant to keep you in jail. It was supposed to be an incentive, so it should be at a place where you can afford it.
Okay.
The problem is that a lot of people are in poverty and cannot afford their bail. So we pay bills from $25 up into $15,000 to $17,000, working with families and groups. So when we pay those bills, we give people a fighting chance. So you're outside, which you should be able to do. Nobody's going to fight for your innocence in your case like you are. So you can get the evidence you need. You can do everything you need to do and assist who's ever helping you through this legal process. So because there's so many baked in injustices in our justice system, we wanted to work on the front end. So there's this train that's headed towards mass incarceration. And on the front end is pretrial, meaning people who are held, they have not been convicted. They are being held pretrial until their case is done. The problem is here in Kentucky, we're an incarceration state. Second of all, our cases tend to last a long time. So 9 months is around the average case that we would see. So that means even if it was just a 9-month case, that's 9 months of your life that is held up, that you don't know what move you can make. You don't know if you'll be sentenced to something. You don't know.
Depending on others who help you fight your case from outside.
Exactly.
Okay.
And people are held. We've bailed people out who were held for 2 months on a $25 surety bond. That means you know me, and you'll go in and you'll pay $25. It'll be $500 held over your head if I don't come back to court. But you'll say, I know Shameka, she'll come back to court. You sign, you pay $25, you're out. We've actually had people who sit in there for weeks and months on a $25 surety bond. And sometimes their family don't know.
And let me stop you for a second. I'm going to let you guys get in. Let me make this important point. This is what often happens in the criminal justice system. I can be charged with say I'm picked up and I'm arrested for something. What often happens is initially from the stop. The stop may be racial profiling or whatever, but we'll even get past that. Yeah. So when we get to the charge, right, it's often an overcharge. So say I have a simple trespassing, right? I'll give you an example. 2001 or 2. I'm in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I'll make this real short. I'm in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And we were going time or something like that. This is years ago. So we're going to a club. I pulled out of the club, and it was a nice truck. And I pulled out of the club, and Warren County police officer comes to my vehicle at a red light, head on. I'm at the red light. He parked his vehicle nose to nose with mine. Right, a passenger in the back of my car threw a cup out of the back window. Right, a female. She threw a cup out of the back window. So that was his reason for stopping. Right, so he got out of the car, and he got me out of the car. And because we were leaving the club, he made me do a sobriety test, right? I hadn't had what I didn't know. I'm in Warren County. I didn't know they stopped selling liquor at the club at 1 a.m. I'm a typical black. I get to the club at 1:30. I missed last call already. Yeah, I missed last call. So I hadn't had anything to drink. Right. So he pulls me out of the truck in the middle of the street by this Good Timers Club. We're in the middle of the street. He makes me do the sobriety test. So I'm like, okay, no problem, right? So I do the sobriety test. He made me do sobriety tests for 27 minutes. He made me do them so long, I can no longer. Right. The purpose was to make me walk in a line so long and touch my nose until I just failed, right? I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't walk. So I failed. So at the scene, they had a breathalyzer, what's called a pass-fail breathalyzer, right? So when you blow in it, it basically says positive or negative for alcohol, not an amount, right? So I blow in it, and it gives like a whatever the lowest, a 0.0000000, nothing there. So I hadn't had anything to drink. So he tells me, well, your test is positive. I have to take you to jail. What? So he takes me to jail, right, in Warren County. I go to jail in Warren County. It's 2000. It was the year the Usher Confession CD was out. Because I was playing an album in my car. Look, so let me tell you, I get to jail, right? When I get to the jail, they had the real breathalyzer. So I blow in it. Nothing blows in the breathalyzer, right? So the officer looks at me and says, you must have bad coordination. I'm pissed, right? But it doesn't stop there. They still charge me. They charge me with being impaired, right? Because his test said a pass-fail, even though the one at the station said completely nothing. And they say that it could have went down from the time I promise you this, right? So because it was an alcohol-related arrest, they made me stay in the drunk tank for 6 hours. Now I'm pissed. Wait a minute. Let me tell you this. I'm in there 6 hours, right? Had to pay $1,200 to get out of jail. $1,200 to get out of jail, right? I said I'm never come back to Bowling Green. So I go back to Louisville. I had to hire an attorney. So I hired an attorney. That was another $1,000 to go to. We go to the first court appearance. The judge looked at me. I promise you, this was the judge where he read the file. And he said, "Oh, we had the young lady in here that threw the cup out of the back window earlier. They charged her with criminal littering." What is criminal littering? It made it a felony because it was criminal littering, right? So the judge adjudicated her case, and he was telling me this, right? So he looked at me and used these exact words. He said, "Oh, the officer didn't show up, of course, right?" He said, "Oh, they out-of-townered you." I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "They saw the Jefferson County plates and decided that they were going to." So long story short, everything was dismissed because there was no DUI, right? Everything was dismissed, but here's the case. Here's the catch. So my $1,200, I couldn't get it back then. So I go home. They say, "We'll mail it to you." So they mail it to me in maybe 3 months, right? I get it back, maybe 120 days. I get it back minus $200-something for court costs. I said, "Oh my God!" I said, "You know what?"
And I think what you brought up though is very important. There's a couple of things that people need to understand, especially when you talk about bail. If just say that was a weekend and they held you for 2 days.
It was a weekend.
What if you worked on the weekend?
Holiday.
What if I didn't have $1,200?
What if you didn't have $1,200? So what happens then is that when you're talking about pre-trial, is that if someone is held for 2 days or 3 days, after that third day, they're more likely to lose their job. They're more likely to lose housing. Kids. If they're the primary caretaker, they're more likely to lose kids. And then if you didn't have that money, then it becomes you didn't show up to court. You didn't have another way back to a Bowling Green. So now you got a warrant out because you didn't show up. And then it becomes a crime of poverty. Yeah. And that is what our system does to black folks. And that's what pre-trial ending cash bail is also trying to do.
Let me wrap this up in 1 minute. So it definitely, thank you, Keturah. So everything Keturah said is what we do anyway. So we were going to be out there anyway, if it was protesters or not. But because what you said, I have 3 daughters in my 20s, one that's Breonna age, and then this one, and then another one. So for me, it is personal, and professionally, I said if we're not out there, there's been almost 500 arrests of protesters. People talk about, until freedom came, there was that amount, 43. There was 50 here. It's been a lot of people arrested. 43. Exactly, and so even though 99% of them have gotten ROR, released on their own recognizance, due to COVID and things like that, we still have pending court cases that go back. So this issue is going to continue. And so when you leave somebody in there pre-trial, I know I was in jail for 38 days pre-trial for defending myself. And I actually did do the things, but I was fighting back. And so you ready to take a plea deal. And so we have a very high conviction rate here in Kentucky. That means people who take a plea just to be done with the case and get out of it, even if they think that they're innocent. So, even if, like your situation, somebody like, I completely was not drinking, whatever, they'll just say yes so they can get out of
jail.
And it just causes so many other problems afterwards with employment, with everything that Keturah mentioned. Those things continue to carry on. So for me, I took it as my personal vendetta. Not vendetta, but I don't want it to be a vendetta. But it can be a vendetta.
Your personal mission.
I took it as I need to be out here, and my team needs to be out here because our young people are being arrested. We see John Lewis, who we just lost, arrested over 45 times. And went on to be congressman. If we are not out here working for our young people, they won't be able to do that in the same way. They won't be able to get jobs. They're taking them. They won't be able to get a gun legally if that's what they want to do. They can't become responsible gun owners. They can't do any of that because like one person is accused of allegedly throwing a firecracker, talk about overcharging. He got a weapons of mass destruction charge.
Wow.
you talk about the felony, like you were saying, the criminal. So for officers, some of these officers just stacking those charges don't mean nothing to them. They're just seeing what stick. It's like they're throwing darts and saying, is this going to stick? Is that? But these are people's lives that are impacted. You have biracial mixed couples. One gets arrested. She gets a breaking a curfew. He gets a rioting charge. That's a felony. You have people who and I'm only saying his name because they put him out there as a leader, like Emmanuel Mitchell, who I just warned before he was arrested. I said, these people will have you dead or in prison. He got the most charges, $10,000 bail. We were able to help pay his bail, and then he's still on harm incarceration because they'll identify people as leaders, question people. It's been a war. It's been an all-out war on our young people. So that's why I'm out there.
Now look, my heart stopped. To speak of that, my heart stopped last week, and it was a praise moment, but I was nervous. I saw the Courier Journal do all these write-ups. I think, Keturah, you were one of the write-ups. Were you one of the write-ups, Shameka?
Yes.
You all one of. So the Courier Journal did like write-up pieces on all these great black women in Louisville on the movement. When I saw it, I love that the community was able to get information on what you guys do because it's so important. But at the same time, like my heart stopped. And I'm thinking, I said, I remember in Ferguson, man, when protesters started coming up dead after the case. And I remember when, and law enforcement will target people that are leaders in the movement. So I'm proud that you guys are strong enough and fearless enough to stand up and fight for the cause. Just be careful.
Yeah.
Just be careful. Be careful. Because a lot of people don't know, and it was mainstream media didn't pick up on a lot of it. But after the Michael Brown uprising in Ferguson, suddenly protesters started dying.
Yeah.
Some were murdered. I remember one was found burnt up in a car.
Yeah.
It was several.
We were there 4 times. Me and my team, we were there.
And we don't know if it was related to that or not, but it happened. So we see a lot of things. So
and I would say this is that's the risk in this work, and that's the risk that even if this case is not blown up in the media, the type of work that we do, we're dangerous to.
We can't get caught out of that bag of weed. We can't do nothing. I tell my daughters, I'm like, don't get in trouble. They're gonna be all Shameka's kids.
And it's funny you say that because the other day I was at a place and I had some drinks and was driving home. When I got home, I said, good and damn well, your ass shouldn't have been driving, because if they pulled you over,
whether you under the limit or not,
it would have been a wrap. Like that would have been the whole news for the next 2 weeks. Keturah Herron, the ACLU, and so like we are, we have to move different, and it is a lot of pressure.
And then one thing when it does happen, they always try to discredit the work that you're doing. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? They always, you know what I'm saying? You always see that where somebody, whatever, everybody has a past, but so the people are stepping up and speaking out. They always try to bring up their criminal record or what they did in the past to discredit that.
That's why I put it out there. I sold drugs. I did it all. But what I'm doing now is it matters. Yep. And so that's why those officers, everybody connected to Breonna Taylor's case, we need to review everything they ever did.
And let's be clear. Let's get this out there because, man, sometimes these feeds, especially when it comes to the media on social media, these feeds are so toxic. But I want to put this out there is that if a person's a drug dealer, if a person's a criminal, if a person commits a crime, that is not a death sentence.
It's not a death sentence.
No one needs we have a process in America that if you're charged with a crime, that you are to be judged by a police are not the judge, jury, and executioner.
That's right.
And in too many cases, we are seeing the police become the judge, jury, and executioner at these scenes. And then you have people that are sympathetic to that cause and say, well, hey, they were selling drugs, and hey, they were doing this and that. That is not an excuse to murder a person.
That's right.
It's not. So, Keturah, moving forward, we have a few minutes left. Breonna's law is currently, what is it in Louisville? Is it an ordinance, is it a policy? What is it in Louisville?
Yeah, so in Louisville, the way they call the language here on the city level, it's an ordinance. So the same thing as a legislation or a law on the state level. So it is in law.
In Louisville.
Here, in Louisville, they do call it an ordinance.
Okay, so are you part of helping take this to Frankfurt to become statewide? Because it's not statewide yet, is it?
It's not.
Okay, so is there a movement to make this statewide?
Yes, I have been working with a team of folks, and actually last week we came up with the timeline and a budget for the campaign. So we will be releasing a huge budget. Like I said earlier, Representative Attica Scott is going to be coming out with a piece of legislation, a version of it, and then I also know that Senator Neal and Senator Stivers is also coming out with a version. So a lot of times with legislation on the state level, there may be a concept, but there may be 4 or 5 different folks who have different versions. It's my job as a lobbyist to make sure the best version goes by.
That's right.
And so for me, I look at all of the versions. If one's moving faster than the other, whatever, we want certain concepts to go. And so for me and my team and what we're going to launch is we're going to launch, these are the concepts that we want in a no-knock, statewide no-knock warrant, and that's what we'll be pushing for. And if at the end of the day that's not what it's for, we'll be saying no. And sometimes it gets kind of tricky because it's like you want something to pass, but you also want it to be meaningful and go further enough. And so sometimes that's a tricky part when you are doing legislation.
Same with bail reform. We've been working on bail reform together for that very reason. We've had 2 or 3 bills proposed, but wouldn't get more people out of jail. Would actually keep more people in jail. And so we had to work together, sometimes behind scenes and working with other groups to say, nah, this is not what we need right now.
We have to wrap this thing up. I'm sorry, we're out of time. I promise I'm going to get you guys back up here. But before we leave, let me say this. For those viewing, you two are an example of what I speak about all the time. And in our community, often, people are not educated on the judicial process, the election process, and you brought up the word lobbying, lobbyists as well. And for you two are an example of why people need to vote. Because not only are you in the ACLU and you're part of the Bail Project, you are in positions now where people of color historically haven't been. Or if they are in those places, they may be people of color but don't represent our particular community. So now you're inside these organizations, you're able to create change from your perspective. If we can also elect people like yourselves in positions in politics, we can also bring that change into politics. It's not going to be an overnight thing, but one person can create change. And people need to educate themselves about the bail issues, about lobbying. People may not like lobbyists, but it's the system we live in now. So if it's the system that exists, we have to have our influence as lobbyists. Yeah, we have to, because that's how bills get passed. And thank you guys for educating our community, but not just educating, for fighting for our community and for fighting for people that look like us.
Yeah, thank you.
We're fighting on all fronts. You know, I ran. I'm out, but I'm still trying to get better judges elected, so we're going to need your help later on.
I'm here. All right, so people tune in to Urban Voices Radio. We thank you for tuning in every Saturday afternoon at 1 p.m. on Power 106 FM. If you can't catch us on air, catch us at kyheartmedia.com and follow us on Urban Voices Radio on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And